This screen explains the calculation of arrears in family law software. This is a straightforward and extremely accurate way of calculating child support arrears. To get to this screen, you click the Negotiate tab and then select Arrears. The process involves clicking through these tabs at the top of the screen. And we will go through them now. The first tab is simply for information. You fill in the party's contact information, but it doesn't affect the calculation at all. The second screen, Obligations, is where you enter the information for the payment obligation. The key lines here are the start date on line 2, the amount to be paid per payment period, which is typically per month, on line 3, and the specification of the payment period on line 4. The other lines can apply if there was a starting principal amount and this is adding to that, or if there was a starting interest amount and this is adding to that, or if for some reason there's a ceiling on the obligation, or if this obligation only runs to a certain date and not to the present moment. If you have a second obligation, you can click this plus sign here and enter information for the second obligation. The next screen is where you enter the interest rates that apply. The basic rate will specify the initial rate that applies, and the interest cycle, which can be monthly or annual or any other cycle, and the computation method, which can be any of a number of methods, can be specified here. The cycle and method are determined by state law. If the interest rates changed during the term of the obligation, you can enter new interest rates by specifying the start date and new rate, and new cycle and computation method, if appropriate, of the changed rates. Now we have entered an obligation and we've entered a rate. If no payments were made, we can click right over to Report and we will see the obligation total. And we can scroll down a bit and we can click this link here to view details. And what you will see is each date when something happened. So here there was an obligation charge, and then here there was an interest charge. And then the next obligation charge, and the next interest charge, and so on. And you can see how these numbers add up to the total of obligation owed and interest owed. But typically there are some payments made, and these fall in two categories. There can be regular payments that are made monthly over a period of time, and there can be one-time payments that are special payments perhaps made around a holiday. So suppose payments are made in the amount of $750, starting when the first payment was due, and running for about a year or so. Instead of a stop date, you can enter a total amount if you know that the payments totaled a certain amount and then stopped. Next, we specify how to apply the payment. Do we apply it to interest only, to interest first and then principal, to principal first and then interest, to the current payment due, then interest, then principal, or to the current payment due and then principal and then interest. This will be specified in the state statute. So we'll say that the payment is being applied first to principal and then to interest. If you have multiple obligations and you want to specify which obligation this payment is for, you would enter the obligation ID here, 1, 2, 3, and so on. Otherwise, leave this blank. Now let's look at entering one-time payments. Again, these are special payments that are made, for example, relating to a holiday. And we can enter the payment amount, we can enter how to apply the payment, we can enter an obligation ID if it applies, and optionally, a short description. Once we've entered the regular payments and the one-time payments that have been made by the payer, we can go back to the report. And again, we see the total that is owed to the recipient, the total principal that is owed, and the total interest that is owed. And again, we can click this report to see details of the obligation and the payments. So once again, we see the $800 charge, and we see the regular payment made against that charge. and then we see the interest on the balance that is outstanding at that moment. If we scroll to the bottom of the page, we can see a further report which explains in detail exactly how each interest payment is calculated. So if your client or the other client or the other attorney or the judge wants to confirm that your calculation is accurate, you have complete detail in order to do that. So you can see that the family law software arrears calculation has the simplicity to handle simple cases quickly and the flexibility to handle any permutation of interest rates, payments, and computation methods you might have. And that's our video for arrears in family law software. Thanks for watching.